Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our.
Sorry. Hang on.
Where's
Okay, right.
why is it doing that? Oh, hang on.
If you think you have a personal, either non-pecuniary or pecuniary interest or bias, please state that now. We've already had that from Councillor Holmes. Any other Councillor Posnett?
Just my usual declaration as being a member of Leicestershire County Council.
If you think you have a personal, either non-pecuniary or pecuniary. Thank you. We'll resume now. Hopefully technology has been sort of amended so it'll work properly. Councillor Stedman, you had your hand raised.
Sorry, yes, I'll be standing down on the first agenda item.
Okay, thank you. I'd just like to announce that agenda item 4.3, which is application 19/01303/full 14 dwellings at Rearsby Lane, Gadsby. We had a last-minute consultation response from Leicestershire County Council regarding school section 106 payments, and this item has now been removed from tonight's agenda. In case anybody waiting or sitting in the public gallery, we won't be hearing that one this evening. Right, we have 3 items on the agenda this evening now. Item 4.1 is erection of business unit, land east of Wolds Farm, Landite Lane, Scalford. I'll hand over to Mr. Worley now, who will address the committee.
Get the images. If you could maybe go just, I think we can get away with just showing the layout. Thanks, Adam. There should be one with some blue hatching. And really that's the only one to discuss tonight because we did all the others last time. That's the fella, thank you. Okay, so this application returns to you after your debate last month when you asked us to look further into the economic development team's view of the application and look into traffic and parking issues, which is why I brought this plan up. And the report returns to you addressing those points, but there's also a little bit more because the applicant, excuse me, the applicant has put in a statement that covered other factors as well around amenity and lighting and things like that. So the whole package has come to you. And may I just check, there was also some requests made after briefing on Monday I think it's fair to say, to dig deeper into some of this information. And you should have all received a pack from me with that information yesterday by email. I'm getting more nods and no shakes. That's always a good sign. Okay, so those details what comprises the covering report in this. The only thing that's actually changed in the application, and the reason that I asked Adam to show this site, is the prospective, if I can stress prospective, suggestions about how the car parking could be reconfigured should consent be forthcoming. And that's the blue hatched area. They would propose to do away with the grey in the bottom right hand corner and relocate it to one or other of the other locations. And you'll see from the report what we're I flagged up at some point in the text that obviously it's within your discretion, should we reach that stage, about how you would want to deal with that aspect of it. So it would certainly need to be a condition to make the switch, but then how you dispense, how you discharge that condition, because we could employ these techniques, excuse me, as we have in the past about delegation, well, coming back to the committee, at the top of that tree, or delegation to whatever selection of officers and members you saw fit, ward member, chair, whatever. I hope the report speaks for itself, so I'll not go through it in detail. As I say, the application hasn't actually changed at all, just a bit more of the information around it. It does have this willingness to make changes, but they're not formally submitted yet. And the recommendation, therefore, from us is the same as last month, but with the invitation to add that extra condition, should you get to this point, about the parking that's on the screen now.
Thank you. Members, do you have any questions for Mr. Worley before we hear the speakers? Nope. Okay. We have two speakers on this item this evening. The first one is Mr. Max Hobbill, who is a neighbour. Thank you. You have 3 minutes, and we're being fairly strict with the timings this evening. You'll get a warning at 2.5 minutes. Okay, start when you're ready.
Good evening, Madam Chair, councillors. Thank you for giving me time again tonight. This application, if you're going to put houses to put on this site, 12 acres of land, you'd get 120 houses. How many people do you think those houses would employ over the next few years, and how much council tax income would you generate? But you wouldn't build houses here because it's classed as an unsustainable, according to SS3 in the local plan. That's a lot of jobs and a lot of income lost. Do we not agree? My farm is also my family home. Like my neighbour, I don't want to live next door to this huge industrial unit with a 24/7 wood chip burner and the commercial vehicles, noise and fumes associated with this site, coming and going at all hours. You've put a lot of conditions on the site for a reason. How many will you be able to enforce? To say this building blends in with my farm is just ridiculous. My farm sits in a landscape that has been shaped for millennium. By agricultural practices, it belongs here among the fields that I farm. None of my sheds are 2-storey, and this building is 3 times the size and twice the height of my largest shed, which doesn't have a veranda or look like an aircraft hangar. It will be obtrusive, offensive in this rural landscape. It's totally unsustainable. Would you build this next to private houses in Melton? It says in the report that the applicant can't afford an industrial site. Does this mean that everyone who cannot afford an industrial site gets the right to build on a greenfield land in the middle of nowhere because it's cheap and because that it sounds like, because it's cheap, because that's what it sounds like? Are the applicant's finances a planning consideration? I asked a farmer on St Bartholomew's Road, which is the mine site road, if he would be willing to sell 10 acres of arable land for this project. His answer was yes. He has an application in for business use for his farm. The council should know about this, but nobody has spoken to him. No one has contacted him. I also spoke to Rotherhill, who do a lot of industrial property around the town, and nobody's contacted him. He has a brownfield site on Asselby Hill next to Howell Works and also on Thorpe Road. And I also understand that Asselby Storage is now up for sale.
I think your time is up now. So 3 minutes is up. It seems to go by really quick, doesn't it? So I'm sorry. Have you nearly finished? No, I think we've got a lot to get through this evening. And you did speak last time. I think it's probably the same context. Yeah, okay, thank you. Councillor Brown.
Yeah, so Mr. Hobart, so can I ask questions of the speaker?
Yeah, sorry. we might tease out some of the things you haven't mentioned through the questions.
Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Brown.
Yeah, really good point that you made in relation to the economic development team, and I will be addressing that issue later on. I have some really interesting information. In relation to the businesses you contacted, were they willing to speak to this applicant and
Yes,
have a discussion?
yes, they all were.
Excellent, that's all I wanted to hear.
Thank you. Any other questions? No, I can't see any hands raised.
Could I just comment on what you just said?
If you
He
want
said to me that to buy industrial property land is £250,000 an acre. This is 20. There's a huge economic growth in putting an industrial site in a greenfield area.
Thank you.
answered your question, Councillor Brown? Thank you. Thank you very much for coming along. Thank you. Our next speaker this evening is Stephen Mayer from Andrew Granger, who is the agent. Again, you have 3 minutes and we'll have a warning of time at 2.5 minutes. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Good evening, councillors. I'm Stephen Mayer, Director at Andrew Granger and Company, representing the applicant. To start with, we believe the proposal before you complies wholly with the adopted Milton local plan, specifically policy EC2, and that development will create and safeguard existing jobs, a view shared by your officers in the committee report and expressed verbally at the August Planning Committee and this evening. At the previous Planning Committee, deferment was proposed to allow the Economic Development Manager to review the proposal and pass comment. We welcome the comments received and agree with the conclusions set out in the committee report. Further consideration was also requested on matters relating to landscaping, vehicle movements, and the proposal's relationship with neighbouring properties. We have discussed with the planning officer a revised scheme, which Mr. Worley has alluded to this evening, which would relocate the parking area and associated vehicle movements from the area adjacent to Stone Pit Cottage to an alternative location. The provision of a 10-metre wide habitat buffer along the site's eastern boundary and a wide belt of mature broadleaf woodland along the site's western boundary will provide screening to mitigate further concerns. The landscaping plan also offers the opportunity to greatly enhance the habitat biodiversity on the site and will enhance the natural and local environment, delivering significant biodiversity net gain. We have this week provided further information on alternative sites, which I believe you have had sight of. As set out in our recent correspondence with Jim Worley, the applicant has received further notice that if planning permission is not granted this evening, Three Shires will need to vacate their existing premises within the next 3 months. As a result, there is a very real prospect that Three Shires will need to relocate out of the borough, resulting in the loss of 63 jobs from Melton. We do not believe this reflects a positive outcome nor demonstrates support for a thriving business which is working collaboratively with partners such as the Carpenters Arms around new employment and training opportunities. Concerns raised by councillors at the last planning committee around job losses is very real, and the applicant is equally concerned regarding the loss of an entire business, which he has built up from scratch and invested significantly in. Three Shires is a well-established business with a strong reputation, experience and stature, committed to providing a mix of employment opportunities and training-based positions within the rural economy. The business is thriving and seeking to expand further, which we believe offers significant benefit to the Melton Borough. The construction of bespoke premises only a mile from the Three Shires existing location would provide continuity not only for the business, but also the rural economy. again compliant with policy EC2. Finally, for a point of clarification, it's noted in the minutes of the last planning committee, the objection relating to access. The search of the highway plan outlines that all of the land required for access and for the visibility displays is within land adopted by Leicestershire County Council. Thank you for your time, and we welcome the officer's recommendation to approve.
Thank you. Any questions, Councillor Brown?
Okay. You said that you welcome the officers' comments, the economic development officer comments. Can I ask if you've actually spoken to the said officers, and if you have, when did those conversations happen?
We were asked at the last planning committee, in fact, it was the planning committee members the last time round that requested a review of the application from the economic development officer. We provided information to the planning officer that was passed on to the team, and the application was reviewed in light of that.
So can I just follow up on that? So through the whole process of putting this planning application in, have you or have you not had a discussion with the economic development team personally?
Not myself personally, no.
Okay, that's all I want to know. I have one more question then after that as well, please. You say that they'll have to vacate within 3 months without, if they don't get planning of the current premises that your client is renting. It's going to take a lot longer than 3 months to build this unit if planning is granted tonight. What's the rationale behind that comment, please?
The applicant was served notice in November 2019 that they had to leave their premises by the following year, so November 2020. The applicant since November 2020 has been paying compensation to the landlord to allow us, obviously, the time and the flexibility to see this application through. We're now at the stage where the landlord wants to release the property for development, as far as I'm aware, and therefore, if planning permission is granted this evening, he would allow until next spring, obviously, for the site to be constructed, the property to be built, the premises to be built out, to deal with the further planning matters. But I guess he's probably, he's given the applicant sufficient time, and now he's saying if it's not dealt with tonight, he would need to look elsewhere.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Councillor Higgins, your hand raised.
Some good questions by Councillor Brown there. So some were similar to mine, but I was the councillor who proposed the deferment, and in the minutes it's quite clear that I asked for the economic development manager to provide a full evaluation of other industrial sites in the borough and what work had taken place between that team, which I'm the portfolio holder of that team, and your client. And I haven't heard anything about either from your 3 minutes or what you just said to Councillor Brown. I've got your letter here where it says from, bear with me a moment, I'm trying to find the page, alternative sites, which is on page 2 and 3. It doesn't really say what sites you'd actively looked at and why it had been discounted. Is it discounted just because of the valuations that of these other sites? And as the previous speaker said, obviously if you build on greenfield, we all know if you build on greenfield, it has no planning permission, so it's pony paddock value. As soon as you get planning permission, it goes through the roof. And this field, if we grant that tonight, this field will be worth considerably more because we've permitted it. And so a lot of people then will just go, I'll just build in greenfield. And that's the whole thing. And we're trying to work out were other sites actually considered properly before, because if we do give permission, you've heard about the impact it is on the neighbouring properties. So it's very difficult for us to try and evaluate that, because if we do permit it, then it is going to impact those residential houses. So we've got to be really sure if we are going to permit it. And so I think I'm giving you the opportunity there to explain what sites. And I think from what Councillor Brown said, it sounds as if no one from the economic team has been engaged in working with the applicant for some particular sites. In the report, it's not mentioned. In your letter, it's not mentioned. So I think if you can convince me and this committee that what's been undertaken, I think that will help, Chair. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. We have sent a further email this week to Jim Worley, which set out 9, 10, 11 properties, I think it was, that were reviewed. There was a Rightmove best price guide for properties that were on the market between October 2019 and May of last year, May 2020. And there was a description alongside within that table that set out why they weren't appropriate. Price of the site, location, size. The majority were being sold for residential development opportunities. I think the point with this application is that the local plan policy EC2 specifically talks about creating, safeguarding existing jobs. If this was a new business proposal, entirely new, in a greenfield site, there would be a different equation because you'd be assessing it as open countryside. The fact is that policy EC2 allows for new development in these locations where it safeguards existing jobs. We've got 63 jobs here, a mix of skills. That was one of the points that was raised at the last planning committee. There was a discussion about retaining those jobs, not wanting to see those jobs go. The fact that Melton Borough struggles to attract those types of businesses, those types of jobs. I'm quite sure there would be many other local authorities that would be delighted to have a business such as Three Shires relocating to. And I don't think, we really want to see the loss of these jobs from Melton Borough. It's policy EC2 that we think is the key one, that this isn't a new development in the open countryside. It's safeguarding existing jobs from a site which is a mile along the road, again in a rural location. But I would like to just clarify that the email we did send earlier this week with a breakdown of the other sites we had looked at has been distributed.
Do you want to come back with another question? Okay.
So when was that assessment done though? Because the document that you sent is only just been created, as I believe. It wasn't a historical document.
We looked at various sites from November 2019 to March of 2020. We don't believe this is something that we can look at in the present. This was done 18 months ago, where there were 17 sites available that's set out in the planning and design statement. Those options were reviewed. There was discussions with landowners elsewhere within the borough. Direct contact was made. We can't contact every landowner. We contacted several. We made direct contact through other land agents. Our own rural team had contact, which we explored. But that work was done in end of 2019, early 2020. We don't really believe we're in a position to be assessing alternative options just now because the application is relating to a site that we've got a red line round.
Just to follow up on that, because I think that's where you're sort of coming from is, and what you're saying is it's not a new business and that's why we're trying to safeguard the jobs. But the difficulty is, and what the planning committee is trying to balance out, is obviously it is going to impact some people right next door, and where, to be fair, there's lots of greenfields. And I'd understand if a landowner doesn't want to sell something, you can only go, well, what's come up. But your argument is you have gone through that. Now, I would have thought maybe we would have seen some responses within what you sent through. I don't know, but if there was anything, because I'm just reading a document that's dated on the 31st of August. But I don't know if you've got anything where...
There is a newer email from this week that we did submit with a table of sites that we'd assessed.
Okay, well, if maybe... All right, okay. Well, it's the one I'm looking at then, isn't it? So the Rightmove one. It's the one with the PDFs, the 3 PDFs. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you have a further question, Councillor Brown?
Yeah, I just found that an interesting comment. I went back and actually looked myself and I've seen some stuff. For example, I'll just use one example, Old Dalby Business Park. that there's been sites, and I didn't see that on your list, for example. So I do have to really question, to be really, really thorough as to how robustly you have looked at the availability of sites in the borough, because those sites have been on the market for the last few years with different options, and that's just one. Another one's Langor, etc., etc. So I would appreciate a response to that.
Yeah, I think the applicant, the business, by its very nature, is rural. It's based on a rural property at present. The proposal includes significant wildlife habitat enhancements, best practice areas. We've got wildflower meadows. We've got additional tree planting, significant biodiversity net gain, which we don't think we would achieve if this business was located on an industrial park on the edge of Melton, Mulberry, or elsewhere. And that's something that we discussed with a planning officer from the outset.
Any other questions? No. Oh, sorry, I was just going to ask one question, but away you go, Councillor Chandler. No, you go first. Okay.
I think you shot yourself a little bit in the foot there. We've got 41 hectares of land in the local industrial land in the local plan. Why is it right that you should put a building of this size and parking and all the other things that go with it, wood burning stove going on all the time, welding taking place, which you admit that will happen. Why should that happen on a greenfield site between a farm and a very nice house and houses opposite? What, can you just give me an answer why that should take place? This wildlife stuff, there's wildlife on industrial sites at night, foxes and things going looking for food. I mean, we've got roe deer on our industrial sites in Bottisford. Have you looked at Bottisford? No. Thank you.
No, we've assessed several options. There was it was being dealt with as a matter of urgency. The applicant contacted this particular landowner. There was a willingness to engage. It was discussed with the planning officer from the outset, several sites, and through the initial discussions with the planning officer, the proposal was supported. That's why we continued with the site, continued with the proposal. The planning officer hasn't raised an objection to the scheme from the outset. It's something that the first thing we did was come and discuss it with Melton Borough Council Planning Committee, planning officers. We engaged early, and you know, effectively the site is the site that we're looking at. Our focus and what's come through the report is policy EC2, safeguarding existing jobs, and we think that's vital. Yeah.
With respect, these other sites, industrial sites, they're there to protect jobs. They're there to create jobs. I mean, I'm at a loss to understand what you're actually telling us. I'm sorry.
Did you want to respond, or?
I would only be repeating what I've said already, Chair. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Well, I just have one question. You mentioned 61 jobs or 63 jobs? How many of those are actually in Melton? Because I know in the information that was circulated this afternoon, I thought only 29 of them were in Melton. I know that's still potentially loss of jobs, but I just want to get the figures right if we're going to be talking about loss of jobs.
Yeah, so there's a number of fully employed staff is 63. There are 29 employees who live within the Melton Borough area, and there are 34 from elsewhere. It's 63 jobs that could be lost from Melton Borough.
Thank you for that. Okay. I think, Councillor Bindloss.
Thank you, Chair. Just I'm a little bit confused now because we're talking about 60 something jobs, and yet the car parking spaces are actually only for about 36 cars, is it? So I'm not quite sure how that works out. Could you explain that to me, please?
Yeah, so regarding the employees, there's only about there's a large number of employees who come to site on a Monday and leave and spend the rest of the week away on projects. So they're away Monday to Friday. They come back on Friday with the equipment and the kit, and they drop it off. The car parking spaces has been designed in line with the transport engineers and county highways who haven't raised an objection to the scheme. But yeah, not every single employee is on the site 5 days a week.
So there's no point there's at no point that there is going to be all the employees there together, because clearly, obviously, if you had that kind of situation, there'd be a lot of cars parked in the lanes and whatever, wouldn't there?
Yeah, I think the applicant touched on this at the last planning committee that they have a significant number of staff who are out on site from Monday to Friday and are only there on a Monday and only back on a Friday. So the parking spaces, doesn't marry up with the total number of employees.
Just to finish, Chair. So there would be quite a bit of coming and going, wouldn't there, from people coming and going, and then more people coming and going again.
You would have your employees who travel to the site 5 days a week, arriving during office hours. You would then have a proportion of the employees who turn up on a Monday morning, leave on a Monday morning, and don't come back to site until Friday afternoon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. Any other questions? No. Okay, thank you. Well, we've heard our two speakers this evening. Do you want to come back with anything, Mr. Worley, at all?
Well, if I may, please, just a few discrete points. The comments that the speaker started with about housing and policy SS3 were correct in their content, but I can't see how they have any bearing whatsoever on an application like this. And the main reason I'm saying that is that the policy framework for housing is unrecognisable than it is for employment uses, and of course a whole load of other uses as well. So just because it's not suitable for one use doesn't automatically mean it's not for another or any other. So I found that a bit of a distraction, to be honest. We were asked if the financial position of the applicant is a material consideration, and the answer to that is no, quite clearly. I think there's not a single reference to it in the report, including the supplementary report, unless it's in the form of reporting what people have sent to us rather than us being influenced by it. So I'm going to teach grandma to suck eggs, as often happens at about this time on a Thursday. Our focus, your focus, needs to start with the policy framework on this, and we agree with Mr. Mayor that spoke that the principal policy here, I think I can go as far as to say, is the overriding policy here, is EC2 that he mentioned. And EC2, we've reached the conclusion that EC2 is supportive of a scheme like this for largely the reasons that Mr. Mayor spoke of. It makes specific provision for the expansion of existing rural businesses in the rural area. So certainly there's industrial land in great quantities, like Councillor Chandler pointed out, all over the borough. But there's nothing saying that industry has to be in there and can't be anywhere else, because these provisions apply. And they're triggered in this case simply by the geography of the proposal. You, of course, may not reach that conclusion. And what I would go further to say on EC2, that after having established those headlines, it then goes into the details of what a development in a rural location needs to achieve or needs to avoid in equal measure. So, and that takes you to those more specific and detailed issues about the impact on the landscape, like the first speaker spoke of, the impact on neighbouring properties, which some of you asked questions about. Highways that we measured on last month, but hasn't come up yet tonight. I suspect it's only a few minutes away, and so on. And all of that's in EC2. So all of those headings and criteria need to be in your thoughts as you draw a conclusion on that policy. I'm a little bit concerned about this debate about alternative sites, really just reflecting my comments from just a few moments ago. You know, a developer doesn't have to prove to us that his site is the only possible option. Certainly some may try and do that and suggest to you that it's a consideration that weighs all others. But there's not a policy, in this case, there's not a policy lead that takes you there. Because if it's compliant with EC2, other sites don't matter. And I go as far as to say, if it's not compliant with policy EC2, other sites don't matter either, because it just gets refused. EC2 is the heart of the matter, and I'll invite you really to start your debate there.
Thank you. Right, do we have any questions of Mr. Worley before we start the debate? Councillor Brown.
Yeah, cheers. Jim, a lot of conditions there. It's not often we see a recommendation with so many conditions, and also looking at the nature of those conditions, such as closing shuttered doors, etc., at night, not allowing, presuming what it is, forklift trucks with bleepers, etc., which I might want to question whether that complies with other legislation such as HSE, health and safety. How are you going to, if we recommend this tonight, how are you going to ensure that those conditions are all adhered to? Because if they're not adhered to, they could have quite a detrimental effect onto the neighbouring properties.
We're not going to ensure it, the applicant is. But of course, they don't always do that, do they? So our role in this is to enforce where things go wrong, and our powers only come to bear when things go wrong as well. And I think, as you all know, the service that we're equipped to deliver in this council is not to monitor all of the sites all of the time, but it is to respond diligently and actively when we get such reports. In compiling these conditions, just like every other application, we apply in our thoughts the tests that are set out in the PPF and the PPG, and one of those is enforceability. Is it capable of being enforced? So our belief is that each one of those is capable of being enforced should things go wrong.
Any other questions? No. Okay, over to you, members, to start the debate. Who would like to be first? Oh, Councillor Higgins.
I'll just kick it off because I proposed the deferment. So I do agree that, I mean, these businesses and these jobs, and particularly like this, is to be welcomed in Melton, without question. But then I think, as Mr. Worley was saying, it's how all the other things and that pull against this application in this particular location. I mean, EC12, I think Mr. Worley's right. That's definitely a overarching policy which supports this application. But I think, as members expressed last week, and one of the reasons I proposed the deferment about looking at other sites is for members to be comfortable that that there wasn't anything else that they could try, and that the applicant only really had this option. I know that's not really a planning part of the debate, but I know members were really struggling, and I don't know how we would have got out of it without the deferment coming in. That's why I proposed it, and it was supported. But we've given them that opportunity. I mean, for me, I went to site again just to make sure that I had it in my own mind, and it is literally we are going to have something that's quite large and a good source of employment and economic generation. But that tends to, is it Stone Pit House? And there was that objection that came in recently, and I thought that object to put it kind of quite succinct as well. So, but that person still has those rights as well, you know, and has the rights to put that objection in, and that's where my mind is at. And I mean, as I say, I think it's a good business, good jobs, but I'll hear more of the debate to see which side members are going, because as I say, I think members were really struggling last week. Oh, not last meeting.
Councillor Brown.
Okay, yeah. I had a conversation with the economic development team today, and to my surprise, and the reason was today was it's taken me to today to actually get to speak to somebody, which is another surprise, but I'll deal with that issue separately. In relation to that conversation, the economic development team said that they've never met with the applicant. They've not had a conversation with them. And unsurprisingly, they are dealing with another similar applicant who they are having quite a robust conversation with around relocation at a very early stage. So I'm finding it difficult to have to buy the fact that there's been all this work and background work done behind the scenes. I would also question why the planning officer looking at this didn't at the time trigger in his or her head the question, let's go and speak to my colleague across the room, basically. You know, it's a small council, it's 170 employees. I'm really finding that difficult to comprehend, to be perfectly honest. We're on about car parking space. I'll go through each of these points at a time. And then there's comment in the report that they're going to increase that by 10. So why not just have 10 extra car parking spaces now in the plans? Why not have the plans a bit more robustly set out rather than taking a rushed application to this meeting for us to make a rushed decision? Because what does rushed decisions do? They give sometimes bad decisions. Yep. And that's where I'm coming to on this. And I really have to question why it's coming so quickly back to us. It doesn't need to do so. It needs to be worked properly. I have to question some of the conditions, and I disagree with Jim in relation to how you know, if the answer is enforcement, we're going to have to rely on that. Let's get the application right to begin with. That's the first thing. There is other sites, and they haven't been robustly looked at, which are both, as Councillor Chandler said, within the local plan laid out. But also there is other sites that have been for a long time set out and on the market. It's not our. I want to save jobs as much as everybody else, but it's not. It shouldn't be to the detriment of other people or the environment, and that's quite clear. This is grade 3 arable land, and we're going to rip that up when there's probably lower grade land somewhere else that we could work at. I therefore don't feel it meets D1, EC1, and there's an issue with SS3. And I'm quite concerned that this was coming forward and being put forward with us tonight. So on the basis of that, I am unable to support this application tonight.
Yep, of course. I know you mentioned EC1, is it EC2?
Simply struggling to, the very first policy you referenced. I got the EC2 and the SS3, it was the first one.
D1.
E1.
D for Delta, yeah. And actually, I'll propose refusal of this application on those grounds tonight.
Could I ask Chris quickly, your policies were D1, EC2, and what's your other one? EC1 as well. Okay, thank you. Councillor Bindloss?
Yeah, Chair, I'll second. I'd like to second that. Thank you.
Okay.
And
Same.
can I just also add, some of this is about, for me, some of it is about the definition of what is a rural business. Is a rural business of any business trading in a rural area, or is it a business that works on rural matters? Now, that's just one thing. Nobody wants us to lose jobs and livelihoods within this area. We all want to fight tooth and nail to keep jobs. But equally, and as well as that, we have responsibilities to existing residents. And the other thing that's in my mind is, would we be setting a precedent if we let this go ahead? Would we then be having lots of applications just like this one on areas just like this? So, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else want to comment? Councillor Higgins?
Clarification, I think Councillor Brown said SS3, so the refusals, and I wrote EC1, was it D1?
EC1.
Yeah, so it's D1, EC1 and SS3, yeah. And just for me, out of those three, I would struggle, I think I would struggle with SS3 because I think that's housing. But that's me, but I think the others are valid if you was going to go with refusal, but maybe Mr. Warley can explain.
Yeah, I was going to make a similar comment when it was my turn. SS3 is a housing policy, so I don't think it's applicable. I struggle also with EC1 because that's about employment growth in Melton Mowbray, and when meaning town, so we're not here there. But to counterbalance that, if you're finding against D1, I think you're almost automatically finding against EC2 because it has those amenity criteria, just like D1 does really. And so they merge at that point.
Yeah,
So we have an amendment, it is EC2. It's-
sorry,
right,
it's my right.
and D1.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Okay,
Okay.
cheers, Chair. Thank you.
And you're happy with that, Councillor Bidnos? Okay, thank you. I must admit, I am in favour of supporting rural businesses, but I can't help but feel this isn't acceptable. It's in the wrong place. And however, I've looked at it, I've poured over all the information that we've had, and I still come up with my balance is going towards it's not in the right place. And I do agree with it. It's in conflict with the local plan policies, EC2, by the very nature of the business involved and the character of the site and its accessibility. And I did have a look on Facebook because I know it was mentioned somewhere along the line. And I really admire what Three Shires are doing. And they do work during the night sometimes just to get the job done. So then I'm thinking actually the restrictions we're putting on them is going to have a counterbalance in what they're trying to do. So it's a very difficult situation, but I'll leave to the committee to well, you've obviously decided to propose a refusal. So is there any other comments this evening on that? Councillor Higgins?
I'm happy with the reasons put forward by Councillor Brown, but I'm probably going to abstain, probably just for the reason of what you were saying. I think it's just been a bit rushed, and so I'm a bit torn of the conflict of the impact of a refusal for the jobs. But I am really struggling. I just don't think it is in the right place, and there's plenty of other fields. And I know that that's very difficult as well. You can't get someone to sell the land, but I feel as if it's been rushed. And I don't normally like abstaining, but I think if I refused it, I'd feel a bit bad about the job side. But equally, I don't think I've got enough information to support it either. So I'll be abstaining from it. But for those reasons and those reasons alone.
I think I feel likewise on that one, to be honest. We've had a proposal to refuse. If we go to the vote now, all those in favour of refusal, please raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 refuse. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 refusal. Against? Abstentions? It's 2. You got a note of that, yeah? Okay, yep.
So can I just check we've got this right to, formalise this in the paperwork tomorrow? So it's refused because of the impact on the landscape and the neighbour, and because of its design, which renders it contrary to policy I'm starting now. D1, I wrote this stuff, D1 and EC2. Those 3 strands, that's what I'm really trying to get at. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, well done. Application is refused. Would you like to come back to the table, Councillor Steadman and Holmes?
Madam Chairman, it's been difficult to hear some of the debate and the speakers tonight. some people you hear quite clearly and other people I'm struggling with. I don't know if there's anything wrong with the technology yet again, but it certainly, it ebbs and flows.
Yeah, I've noticed that as well. I think I notice it more when people are sitting back like that. So I think the tip is to get nearer the mic.
Right, welcome back, Councillor Steadman and Councillor Holmes. The next item on the agenda
Madam
is...
Chairman, if I just might say, I did actually suggest that because you couldn't hear at the back very well, if you were hard of hearing, you wouldn't have heard at the back. But I do think we've all got to put our mics a lot closer to us. The gentleman who was sitting there, or gentlemen, you could hear them because they were closer. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. So members, if you could just move closer to your microphone. Don't swallow it, but get quite close that we can actually hear everything. Thank you. Right, again, item 4.2, which is 20/00295 Easthorpe Lodge, Manor Road, Easthorpe. Mr. Worley, over to you.
I think this is the last time I sign holiday sheets, by the way. So you thought the last one was complicated, had a lot of issues. Well, here we go. That's not a flippant comment. This brings an awful lot to the table and an awful lot on like each side of the equation, good and bad, and therefore quite a conundrum for you to adjudicate. But it's what we're here for. So the application, and that's the layout, is for 36 houses. Just to benchmark that, that's against 19 dwellings that are allocated in the local plan through the estimated capacity that you're so familiar with because it's sort of omnipresent through the local plan, and 29 through the consents that have been granted on the site in the not too distant past. So they're important benchmarks because there's a debate about the extent to which this is expanding, and they're your sort of two baselines to make comparisons against. So the applicant in this occasion is making a very strong bid that the eco credentials of this scheme are so attractive to, or should be seen as to be so attractive to us, that some normal expectations can be set aside because the value that we should import to the, I think it's fair to say, undoubtedly positive eco credentials. They're listed in the report. I might trip, I hope no one trips me over this. I think this takes us to a level we haven't seen before. So the premise is, for a large scale development anyway, so the premise is correct, but there's also that downside around those normal expectations being absent in this. And what would be my normal expectations on this one is particularly affordable housing. That's going missing, and expanding the site to the 36 I referred to beyond the benchmarks that we've set through the local plan and through those earlier decisions. The other thing that's notable and probably difficult in this application is it's attracted a vast array of developer contribution requests from a number of sources, and you'll see there's great swathes of this report that wades through those one by one. Some of them you'll be extremely familiar with, bordering on the routine, supported in the usual way from the likes of the county council, and as usual we find those compliant because those guys have learned the rules and they play them rather well. But we've also received in this case a list from Councillor Pritchard, reflecting what's in the draft developer contributions SPD. I bet none of you have been able to see that today because it only came out at about 5 o'clock, but it's now heading towards Cabinet next week with a recommendation to adopt onto full council to adopt, to be precise with the governance of it. Same exercises applied. We've gone through those one by one, applying the tests of SIL, and some we feel make the grade, others don't, for various reasons. It's all mapped out in the report, and should there be questions, it should be quite easy to understand the rationale. And in a very similar vein, the parish council's also put together its list. There's a degree of overlap with Councillor Pritchett's, which makes life a little bit easier. And similarly, we're finding some make the grade and others don't because of SIL tests, not because, no questioning their desirability, just whether they can be applied in SIL terms to the proposition that's on the table. The bar is quite high when you get into this game. We're not in the game of wish lists. So bringing all that to a head, if I can refer you to a particular part of the report, towards the bottom of section 5, when we talk about planning balance. In that section, we've basically tried to summarise and almost literally pitch against one another, the plus side against the minus side. You've heard me use these words before. There's no particular rules around this. There's no formula we can rely upon. It requires your judgment as to whether plus side outweighs negative side or vice versa. You'll see that, and I don't mind admitting by a narrow margin, we've concluded that plus side has come through in this debate. As I say, it's exactly the reason we have a planning committee made up of a diverse background in order to reach these judgments. And I'm afraid at that point I get to pass the baton on and invite you to go through the head scratching that we've been through.
Thank you for that. Do you have any quick questions for Jim Worley before we start? No, okay. We have 3 speakers on this item this evening. The first one is Councillor Bob Bayman, the Parish Council, Bottisford Parish Council. I think, as you may have gathered, we're being quite strict with time this evening, so you'll get a warning at 2.5 minutes. Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, committee, for the opportunity to speak to you tonight. As you know, this is built in the middle of the zone of separation between Bottisford and Easthorpe, and therefore was never a plan that the Parish Council supported. That said, it's got this far, and through the process, we've found the developer to be very collaborative and supportive and helpful, listens to a lot to the parish needs, and as Jim Worley has already said, has created something that is of a very high standard and should be a high benchmark. I think that I would encourage this planning committee to adopt to other parts across the rest of the borough. That said, there are 2 specific things that are still a problem for us and remain, and that leaves us still objecting to this site. The first is how we make sure that people can get from the site to the middle of the village without necessarily jumping in the car. The level of expectations from Leicestershire County Council Highways, as you know, is quite low in this regard. So we all talk a good game about environmental and car reduction, but in reality, they're putting no stress on the need for cycle route or footpath enlargement. We know from being local parishioners that we need to have that path that runs along Manor Lane widened so that people can walk along it, and a cycle path put in so people can get to school in the middle of the village. It's only about 100 metres, but it's not in the plan at the moment, and as such, we are objecting. We suggest that it's thrown out. Similarly, we've put in another plan to put in a path that runs from the back of the site across to the wickets, which members will know is on Beaver Road, which again creates good access to village and the centre of the village and to the schools. And again, this is not in the planners at the moment. And again, I would say, you know, you do confer with Leicestershire County Council, and they do tell you what they think. They're very basic standards. They're not good enough. They're not good enough for environmentalism. They're not good enough for kids keeping healthy and fit and getting back into the village centre. They're not good enough anywhere in the borough, but they're certainly not good enough for our parish. And it doesn't fit within our NP, Neighbourhood Plan, Policy 9. Neither does it fit with Policy C9 of the Melton Local Plan. So consequently, we would recommend it's thrown out on that regard. And finally, there's a TPO. There's a tree on the corner of the junction between the green Lane and Manor Lane, and there is no way in heaven that that tree needs to be felled. It's only being felled, it's only planned to be felled because it's within the letter of the law. Actually, we need cars to slow down at that junction, to stop and then draw onto the road. It could actually be a benefit. So I would absolutely, I'll be hanging in that tree myself before it's chopped down. I'll be strapping myself in there like Scruffy or whatever his name was, Swampy, before that's chopped down, because it's a scandal to see trees like that chopped down when there's absolutely no need for it to happen. If this continues and this carries on and you approve it today, I hope that you will put a major sense of care and sensitivity on the site as it goes forward to development, and you put that pressure on the developers to continue. The final thing I would say, and then I'll wrap up, is that the 106 payments on this site are appalling. You will see the old bus passes on the 106s again, which will not get spent. People don't use buses in buses because there are none, and yet the money isn't being spent where we as parish council wanted to be spent. So again, I would say if it goes through, be very, very diligent and thorough in your analysis of 106. Thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you. Just over, but I'll let you, I thought you were going to conclude anyway. Thank you. Do we have any questions for the speaker? Councillor Higgins.
It's just a question, and then obviously I think Mr. Worley can answer it. You said about bus passes, and I think on the draft section 106 that Melton Borough Council has produced, which I think Councillor Pritchett will talk about in a moment. If we were going to swap and change some of these section 106 requests about, which one would you say is more important? And in your opinion, obviously more than bus passes, which one would you say is more important?
Sure, yeah, getting the paying for some way of getting the access for people to be able to walk from the site into the village comfortably. So therefore widening the path on Manor Road and putting in a cycle path between the site and the centre of Bottisford. The bus passes are, there's no buses, so it's a joke. And as Jim Worley said earlier, we know that Leicestershire County Council are really good at playing the game, right? But it is a game, they're good at stacking the cash up, but they know very well it's not going to get spent. Thank you.
Councillor Holmes, does that answer your question?
It does, and I'll be very interested if Councillor, what's your surname, sorry?
Bayman.
Bayman, that Councillor Bayman should go along to have a chat with County Hall on a few things. He's very well informed.
Okay, Councillor Holmes.
Councillor Bayman, you've probably seen and read about the problems we have at Waltham with sewage and water. Because these houses are being built, presumably, can you tell me how your water is affected? Because if there's going to be more houses, there's going to be more need for water, and there's going to be a problem with sewage. We have live sewage in Waltham still. So I don't know whether you've got anything to say about that, please.
We have two problems with water. We have not enough coming in at the moment in parts of our parish, and we have too much coming in at other times. There are big areas of our borough, of our parish, that are affected by flooding. And again, not enough has been done to sort that issue out in and around this site. I believe this site is not an issue for flooding, but just up the road, only 50 metres away, is heavily affected by flooding not that long ago. Yeah, absolutely.
Any other questions? No, can't see any hands raised. Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Joe Taylor from Gusto Group, who's on behalf of the agent. You have 3 minutes, and again, you'll have a 2.5 minute warning. Okay.
Thank you. Good evening. Gusto Homes have been pioneering the design and construction of low energy homes for over 20 years, and we're delighted to have the opportunity to continue this at Easthorpe. Our recent Woodlands Edge development in Lincolnshire was built to a net zero carbon standard through an agreement with West Lindsey District Council. West Lindsey have showcased this development to councillors, housing associations and other developers using it as the basis for their upcoming local plan document. Unfortunately, until national legislation increases the building regulations to a net zero carbon standard, there will always be a cost premium for this type of construction. During our application, we engaged and collaborated with your planning department, neighbours, and the parish and borough council to evolve a design that reflects local demand, responds to the character of the area, and delivers an exemplar net zero carbon development at a time of significant climate change challenges. Beyond our own agenda for sustainable development, the evolution of the scheme has been driven by the following key factors. Melton Borough Council has signed up to the climate emergency and therefore require an example of a net zero development within their borough if they are to encourage other developments to do the same. There was pressure from the parish council to reduce the number of houses on the site and focus efforts on enhanced quality and sustainability. We are advised and understand that there are already a good number of developments locally that are delivering affordable housing to meet need, and therefore the supply of affordable homes on this site is not critical. Similar to our approach in West Lindsey, the removal of affordable housing requirements enables the investment to be redirected into increasing the development's overall performance and sustainability credentials. As you will hopefully appreciate from this application, the design and layout have been carefully considered, reflecting feedback from consultees throughout the design process and working with and around the existing mature landscape features. The inclusion of retirement bungalows on the refurbished lodge site provides low-scale units with no overlooking, whilst meeting a real need to encourage downsizers into vacating larger family homes to move into attractive retirement properties which cater for their future needs. We understand flood risk is a sensitive subject. We therefore have a comprehensive flood mitigation and suds drainage strategy, including additional compensation storage on the site to ensure the development does not have any negative impact on the surrounding area. We also have formal agreement to positive drainage outfall from the site agreed with the IDB. Gusto homes go beyond house building. Our home buyers all become shareholders of a resident-owned management company, retaining control over the overall site. We support their integration into the wider community through the Gusto Community Fund, which gives each resident £500 to a project or charity within their new community. This has been successfully piloted in Collingham and had a huge benefit to the community, both financially and in embedding new residents. We hope you can support our application and look forward to the opportunity to work with the Borough and Parish Council, as well as the wider community, on delivering this exemplar housing scheme.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Higgins, you have a question?
You said that you was in dialogue and that there wasn't any need for affordable homes. Who said that?
That came through part of the consultation process with the councillors in the workshops. There were some comments made about the lack of need for affordable housing in an argument about the number of properties that we're providing on the site. We've since then had direct dialogue with the affordable housing officer, who has confirmed our position in the context of our overall proposal with the zero carbon credentials.
So it wasn't this council? Wasn't this council who said that? You said councillors, but
it was a workshop with the councillors. I believe it was Councillor Pritchard who.
Oh, so the ward councillors, but wasn't.
No, sorry.
Wasn't this council that?
No, sorry, it was the ward councillors.
That's okay. And this development you've got in Lincoln, West Lindsey. I know West Lindsey. Well, I've got it up on the internet. Do you have any affordable housing on that site at all?
No, it was exactly the same principle applied there. There was a desire by that council to have a exemplar zero carbon scheme within their borough.
Thanks for that, Chair. Thank you.
Councillor Brown.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Just a few questions, really. First one is, I noticed on the website, and maybe it might have changed from when I last looked at it today, but there's still an upholding concern held by the LLFA in regards to the flood and water drainage. Have you addressed that?
We're in the process of addressing that on the basis of the response came through quite late. It was only in August when we got that. So we responded with a series of information. We then got a response to that only last Thursday. And so we're now working through. So we do have, one of their concerns was about the our ability to discharge. We do have a formal approval from the IDB to discharge into the watercourse to the south, and our engineers are compiling the information to go back to them with at the moment.
Next one is probably following on from what Councillor Higgins said around affordability. Again, I'm going to have to question officers as to how we've come up with the fact that there's no affordable need in Bottisford, when I'm basically the portfolio holder for council housing and landlord services, and I have a waiting list going through the roof in relation to need, and that includes Bottisford. Have you therefore approached any housing associations to look at them coming on board to provide either shared ownership or rented accommodation? That's my first question, because there is many in the East Midlands who do and can produce, with grant from Homes England, good carbon neutral homes. And the other question I don't accept, the other point I'd be interested in is, if not, why that wasn't considered. And then secondly, market discount. Why couldn't some of these homes be put up for market discount? Because Bottisford, and I'll quote this, Melton Mowbray's got about an average house price of 280,000. Bottisford's over 300,000. So in a low income area, would you not be considering how could we get some of these young people or smaller families onto the ladder who work on low incomes? Bearing in mind the average income for our borough is only £24,000 per, it's low. Has this been considered, and have all those points robustly been discussed with our planning officers and our housing officers?
Our original proposal was policy compliant in terms of affordable home provision, and looked at the in perpetuity discount model, and that was the route we were pursuing until we came up with the discussion that we've previously mentioned with the ward councillors about the lack of demand because of the provision in other areas, and that's something that we then moved away from. So we did also in our initial proposals, we were looking at various models in terms of shared ownership and things like that. So that's something we were looking at.
Of course.
Gentleman, he keeps referring to the ward councillor. I've had no meeting with him whatsoever.
I think he's referring to the other ward councillor.
The meetings unfortunately were set up by the planning officer, so we could only speak to the people who attended the meeting. We would happily have met with you as well.
I think they were actually workshops, and the invitation would have gone to every councillor. Okay. Councillor Higgins, another question.
Yeah, it's just a point of clarification, because so this whole thing about affordable housing, it wasn't this council, because ward councillors could say whatever they like, they can, so it wasn't officially from this council, because that's the bit I'm trying to get. It was just you had conversations with the ward councillor and various other people, but it wasn't this council, it wasn't our planning officers or our housing officers or the growth and regen portfolio, which said we don't need affordable housing.
We did liaise with the planning officers and also with the Melton Borough Council housing officer.
And they said to you, we don't need the affordables.
They said that the balance in this situation and with the provision in the local area, that they would accept our position. I don't want to quote the exact wording, but
okay.
that was the impression we were given.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll bring that up in debate, Chair, then, if our officers have said something like that, because I thought the speaker said after discussions with the ward councillors, we took the affordable housing out. We were going to be policy compliant, and then for some reason, which will feature in the debate, it's come out. But I'm trying to work out, is it our officers or is it the ward councillor?
So it's just important to probably clarify that the original position, we had 42 houses on the site and were policy compliant in terms of mix and affordable housing provision. And it was looking at the balance of the overall viability of the scheme that we looked at the possibility of using the affordable housing provision towards the zero carbon credentials.
Okay, Councillor Bindloss.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I welcome the fact that you have spoken with the parish council on a number of things, and that's good. But you know, I really can't get over the issue with the access to the village from the site. You know, we want to reduce the amount of cars, and having that access, a safe access for all pedestrians, is absolutely crucial. And I'm disappointed that isn't something that has been resolved as suggested by Parish Council. Furthermore, and I'm pleased to see that you've got bungalows there for over 55s, but you know, when you get older, you tend to see people with mobility scooters. And with mobility scooters, you'll need to be able to get from where you live, obviously, into the village. Now, that's going to be a major problem if there is no safe access for them into the village. Can you just explain your thoughts on that, please?
We've always been supportive in working with the parish council on these links into the village. Where it's difficult for us, having then spoken with the Highways Authority in terms of the issues raised by the parish council about traffic issues, that they didn't back up that, and nothing in their responses to our application led us to needing to do that. We were, however, and are prepared to work and finance some of these things. The issue for us is they're outside of our red line boundary and they're in third-party ownership. So what we can't do is commit to something in our application that is on land that we don't own. So we were prepared and are prepared to work with the parish council within reason and within a reasonable timescale. If that's something that a third-party landowner is prepared to allow that access across their land, we're prepared to assist in making that happen. It's just impossible for us to do that without ownership of that land. And also when we talked about the widening of the footpath along Manor Road, and we talked to Highways about that, again, they come at it from a different position, that they say that if the money needs to be put into that from Highways, that then it has to go to the back of the queue in terms of other areas. So it's not for a want of trying on our part that issue can't be resolved. We're still prepared to work with the parish council on it.
Thank you for that. Thank you.
Councillor Stedman.
Yeah, I just have a quick question, actually. At any point, have you had any meetings? Well, we've heard from Councillor Chandler, but have you had any meetings with Councillor Pritchett at all? Because, you know, quite a few councillors sat around this table have worked on large allocated sites with their parish councils in the local area with their local knowledge, and it sounds like you've had no dialogue with either of the borough councillors at all. Is that correct?
We have had a meeting with Councillor Pritchett.
Okay, thank you.
It was part of a workshop.
Wasn't pre-arranged with planning officers or anything?
The planning officer arranged the workshop.
But not specific for this site?
For this site, yes.
Site.
It was a specific, it was a I think it was a pre-committee workshop.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? No. Okay, thank you very much. Oh, sorry, Councillor Holmes, you're down. I
did. I put it up some time ago because I'm just a bit concerned. Never in the time that I've been on a planning committee has something been sorted with a workshop. I don't know where we're coming from. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to get at you at all, but I can't work this one out. That we decide on plans for an application at a workshop. Can somebody enlighten me? Because it's never ever happened before. So, you know, when we work as we do in our rural areas and work jolly hard, we actually want to be informed, obviously, by everybody. And you'd only got one of the councillors, you know, with it being informed. So I don't know where this has come from, because everybody works very hard to get things right for our communities. So I'm not telling you off, don't think at all I am, but I just have never known ever a workshop sorting out an application. Thank you. I really would like to know where this has come about, please.
It's probably a difficult one for me to answer this. We were just invited to the workshop by the planning officer.
Thank you. No other questions? No. Okay, thank you. Our next speaker this evening is the ward councillor, one of the ward councillors, Councillor Don Pritchett.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
You have 3 minutes and you'll be having a warning at 2.5, okay?
Thank you very much, councillors. Going through the report cross-references to the neighbourhood plan, but there's no evidence within the report that it's been considered and evaluated. A recent year-old application has been decided, quoting a neighbourhood plan policy. The outcome may well be the same. The neighbourhood plan puts flesh on the bones of is consistent with the local plan, but there's no evidence of it. In respect of considering overdevelopment, the neighbourhood plan makes statements for Eastup, avoid the perception of coalescence that could change settlement form and character. Development will be supported where the proposal would not lead to a site becoming overdeveloped and out of scale with the immediate character of the locality, and a layout that protects and minimises the effect on the scheduled monument, the design density and scale and configuration that reinforces the rural character of the area as defined in the Bottesford Design Code, part of the neighbourhood plan. On affordable housing, I'll clear this one up. Within a document on the portal, I think a viability statement, it was the housing officer that is being quoted as making the statement that there's adequate affordable housing, and the report says the housing officer has confirmed that. So that's where that came from, and I don't recognise the statement. Various things that in the neighbourhood plan, 7.5% social housing compared to a borough-wide 11%. Affordables are not yet guaranteed in other schemes, pipeline schemes. When First Homes comes in at 30% discount, those working on locally, a lot of the local people on average salaries and particularly local salaries will lose out on them, and they will eat into the rental amounts. Full analysis 71 to 77 in the neighbourhood plan. If you were to give permission, the desires for carbon neutral that are being offered in lieu of affordable housing are not listed in the conditions or section 106. I don't doubt the applicant, but there's no listing there to guarantee them. The housing mix at 11%, two beds is lower than the 30% in the neighbourhood plan. In terms of good design materials, SS1, D1, neighbourhood policy 8, and policies 18 and 19 for Easthorpe, site specific, the report states the traditional materials to be agreed later, right? The neighbourhood plan says use of materials and a colour palette that complements materials used in Easthorpe Village. Given the neighbourhood plan, and now we have an SPD with design as well, this needs to be part of the decision process, not something that's left for a technical officer to get a brick in the post. and decide on. I know it's not quite like that, but it's missed the design workshops and it's not included tonight.
Sorry to interrupt, but your 3 minutes is up.
Right. Just say I'm not convinced with the viability trail on this.
Thank you. Any questions for Councillor Pritchett before he moves? No. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right. Do you want to add anything or query anything?
Yeah, I'll try and answer
Jim?
some of those points. There's a lot of points to answer. I'll try the easiest one first. So the questions about the affordable housing and the housing policy officer's role in that is conveyed at paragraph 5.3.13, and that's either verbatim, the advice given, or very close to verbatim. It doesn't say there's no demand. Please note, it doesn't say there's no demand. It says there's good supply. I remember on Monday someone remarking on that. So I would qualify that by saying, I don't think that's trying to say in the present tense, here, now, today. It's having a view to the schemes that we know are going to deliver at the same time that this site would deliver. So it all come to a head at the same time. If I next pick up the procedural point, Councillor Holmes's point about workshops. Maybe you've been insulated from them, Lane, because I haven't been in one of Waltham, basically. So the workshops were conceived and trialled in shortly after Margaret's chairmanship in 2019. Some of them were tremendously successful, and even at their worst, they do no harm. So they became an integral part of a modus operandi. After about 6 months, we've probably done upwards of 20. Every major scheme has one now, and now it's built into the requirements you asked of us through the planning review as an absolute core function of how we deal with major schemes. Examples of flying in my memory at the moment. Councillor Brown was involved in very detailed discussions in Frisbee. We got all that improvement for the Barrett site in Mountain Mowbray on the back of one of these. Oh, just catching Councillor Glance's eye. The other sort of exemplar of their effectiveness is the Mountain Spinney Road stuff. I think I made the point, so I'll not go on, but they're frequent and helpful.
I wouldn't call those workshops. Probably that's a different word then.
They called them community liaison in different scenarios. I chaired one in Stabburn that somehow acquired that title. It was the same thing though. Right, moving on. On some of the 106 stuff, and particularly the questions of the paths connecting to the central Bottisford. Speaking as an employee, strictly as an employee of Mountain Borough Council here, I have a difference of opinion with Councillor Bayman on almost a philosophical level on this. And the reason for that is that we as a council have determined that Easthorpe, due to its proximity to Bottisford, is of sufficient sustainability to attract housing development. So philosophically, I can't sit here and with my hand on my heart and say to you that it's okay then to say it's not well enough connected to Bottisford at all, and it has to have a footpath link to make it so. So on that question of need, relying on the judgments that we've baked in to the local plan that we're working to now, there would be a complete contradiction in the philosophies between, on the one hand saying it's close enough, and on the other saying it's not close enough. So that's where it falls foul from the perspective of the role I fulfill at this council. I said in introduction, there's a whole host of desirable aspects of this scheme, and there's unfortunately a list of adverse effects as well. Personally, because it's a corporate priority, affordable housing would top that list for me, which is why it features in this report and in the bringing together of the issues towards the end of section 5. Housing mix is another, but it does balance against this eco credentials of the scheme, which, as I think you all know, is at the forefront of national policy at the moment, and therefore a really difficult balancing act.
Thank you. Councillor Posnett.
I just wanted to follow on from what Councillor Holmes had said and from what Mr. Worley had said. I just wanted to relate that on election day, a parish councillor approached me and thanked me for the new system that we'd brought into planning. The parish councils thought they were invaluable.
Thank you for that. You took the words out of my mouth. So thank you. And I know a lot of other councillors have had sort of benefits. They found it very beneficial. In particular, Councillor Steadman's worked very hard on various workshops or liaison meetings, however we want to call them. So I don't know whether there will be one in your area, Elaine, but we'll have to wait and see. Thank you. Yeah. I think you've had your fair share.
You are invited to the one tomorrow.
Which one?
Okay. Councillor Steadman, did you have your hand raised?
Yeah, I have a question for Jim. Was that a workshop? I didn't know that was a workshop. At 5, can you hear me? Do I need a microphone? At 573, it said internal ground floor levels of the dwellings are elevated a minimum of 150 mil above the external ground level to reduce the risk of localised flooding. What's the maximum you can have for these floor levels? I think you know why I'm asking.
Sorry, Councillor Sedman, I'm struggling to hear you, but because of me, not because of you. I'm full of catarrh, basically.
Do you want me to shout? Is that better?
No, I go home for that.
At 573, it says internal ground floor levels of the dwellings are elevated a minimum of 150 mil above the external ground level to reduce the risk of localised flooding. Is there a maximum to that? And I think you know why I'm asking.
I've got it here. Thanks. There's not an imposed maximum. You could go as high as needed, basically. Just before you answer, Councillor Sedman, if I've got on a different slide set a wealth of detail about the flooding situation on this site, because I knew this would come up. And if we need to go there and get some slides out, there's a lot of it. It's very technical. Adam would need to do a quick switch for me. But if you could prepare, Adam, it might be handy, just in case. Just go there if the debate requires it, rather than me going on about an hour's speech about what I've learned about flooding in Easthorpe.
Any other questions to Councillor Chandler? You got your hand raised.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm usually very supportive of officers, but I find this report very misleading. It's possibly the worst report I've ever seen as 18 years on the planning committee. If I can just go through quickly, because they are points that I think members should be aware of. We have a 29-page report, and there's no mention, however, of ongoing water problems and the fact that this council has appointed a traffic consultant to advise on how to alleviate congestion in the Bottisford ward. Case officers might like to take note that those living in both Mustn't and Easthorpe are to receive £30 off their next water bills because, and I quote from my letter from Severn Trent, our water pressure fell below 7 metres between the 18th and the 25th of July. Some people might think, oh, it was only a week, it didn't matter. There was a crisis on all the farms. How did people feed out and have water for animals? One particular farmer with a herd of well over 100, they were stampeding. This isn't funny. We keep on building houses and we haven't got the infrastructure. My supply currently is an acceptable standard, but at a recent meeting called by the chief executive of this council, Severn Trent acknowledged there is nothing in their capital programme during the next 2 years to do the required work on the main to the east of Bingham. However, they've made no comment at all as statutory consultees to this application to build 35 homes where they have agreed the service they're providing is inadequate. Traffic, if this proposal goes with the recommendation, a further 70 plus cars together with service vehicles is going to clog us up even more. County highways do not seem to get it. People no longer walk to the shops and other amenities. They use their cars, which they consider cost a lot of money to keep on the road. Flooding. The report dismisses this as a low risk happening, but if flooding did take place, there's an escape route along Manor Road to the south onto the A52, as this route is outside the 1 in 100 2-year flood envelope and will be dry. May I point out to the author of this report that in July 2001, I was parish chairman on the Thursday when several areas of the parish suffered devastating flooding, and the escape route suggested was under 2 to 3 feet of water, with the corner house and an adjacent bungalow having water in their homes up to the windowsills. Fire tenders were still on site 2 days after the event, pumping water away. That's some escape route. The area of separation, perhaps somebody can define where it is to me, because as a local person, I've no idea where it is now. When preparing the local plan, I went along with the agreed numbers of 9 and 12, making 21 for this site. That will be far more in keeping with Easthorpe, which has always been documented as a hamlet. There would have been no postage stamp gardens as are proposed. One of the characteristics of Easthorpe has been gardens of between 1/4 and ½ an acre. Historic England appear to have been totally ignored. They have always opposed the plans on the grounds that the proposal would negatively impact and result in harm to the setting of the hidden monument. And they do quote the NPPF in 3 sections. A willing band of locals have been working on a neighbourhood plan for the parish, which was passed at referendum on September the 2nd. And the main part of the neighbourhood plan, which is the big plus point for the area, it features on design and it wants better design. And personally, I don't think we are getting better design here. Whilst I welcome the green credentials offered, does this cancel out the carbon footprint caused by 500 or so people travelling into Bottisford each day for employment? Again, because we're told that to provide the necessary numbers of affordables, it's not viable. Bottisford is in need of affordables. One only has to scan Rightmove to see the price of 2 to 3 bedroomed properties and talk to our employers. And I sympathise with Councillor Brown here. Does anybody ever go out and talk to our employers? Because what they tell me, nobody does. The neighbourhood plan is also very strong on design, especially in conservation areas such as Easthorpe. Why then do we have houses proposed, and I quote, that are relatively tall at 9.6 metres? This opposite Easthorpe Manor and surrounding pasture, which is Riggin Furrow, where there is evidence of medieval settlement activity surviving outside the scheduled monument. I could go on, but I won't. I'll let other people have a go at this, but I'm absolutely disgusted with that report.
Thank you. I'm sure we have a lot of other people who want to take part in the debate, but thank you for your comments, Councillor Chandler. Anybody else? Oh, Councillor Higgins.
Are we in debate now?
Looks like it.
So I didn't have a question. No.
Oh, well, I'd ask a question.
No, I didn't have a question.
You didn't. Okay, no, off you go.
No, I thought Councillor Chandler has been a very esteemed member on the planning committee, and I don't think she spoke as forcefully on any application as she just has. And I've just done some figures from the report here, because this is where, and this will be no surprise to the officers here, but affordable housing, if we're not careful, we're going to throw them all away. There was another paper tonight throwing more affordable housing away. Now, if we're not going to have some sites delivering affordable housing, commuted sums is a way where then we can get some affordable housing, probably for the Gadsby site, if we was going to transfer some of the commuted sums from this site to that site. But as I said, in Somerby, it is only the work I've done how the Somerby ward has got any affordable housing since I've been elected, because none of my allocated sites have come out yet. And this concerns me, and I'm trying to work with some local developers on some local sites, which the local parish councils are happy with, of turning over some real grot spots in my ward and having some affordable housing on. Now, if we had some commuted sums pot, it would make it easier when I do those negotiations with developers, and we could get some housing supply in here. And I just, as Councillor Chandler said, this had an estimate of 21 dwellings, and it's previously been approved for 27. And then we've gone from 42 houses down to 36 in this application. And I can't understand why we can't have any affordable housing for someone in an eco house. Is it? I'll leave Councillor Brown to say something on that, because I know he will do. So I don't want to steal his thunder on that particular point. But I just think this is wrong, and I think the housing officer has badly advised this application process, because we should be fighting for at least some commuted sums if we're not going to have it on this particular site. And then maybe Councillor Brown, Councillor Child, and myself in the southern rural area will take some affordable housing, because our residents desperately need it. And I'm just very concerned that if we are going to change policies for the MMDR and we're going to reduce affordable housing in the town, then eventually we're going to have no affordable housing anywhere. And then we're going to have a lot of people who are struggling to get on the housing ladder. And when people are in poverty, that causes loads of other issues. And we can forget all the eco stuff and all that, because they'll be living in houses with old storage heaters and everything else. And as Councillor Chandler said, so we've got to be really serious about this. Now, I welcome what the developers is trying to achieve, and their policies and their principles as a company. But this application is wrong for this site. For no affordable housing, it's wrong. And if we are, I do note the Historic England objection. I am very concerned about that. So, and I think we've got to have consideration for that. But when there's sums of money of 90,000, 28,500 for various other projects, and then our housing officer has said we don't need any affordables and has put that in, something's gone wrong. And so I'm not happy, and I won't be supporting this application here. I do welcome what the applicant is trying to do on this site, but I won't be supporting this application. It's just wrong. And I do agree what Councillor Chandler said. I think the report's just wrong. And I have to say, I'm not particularly happy with it at all.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I totally agree with what Councillor Higgins just said. Sometimes we disagree on various things, but certainly not on this issue. I am just still perturbed how the housing officer has come up with this idea that there's no houses needed in the village the size of Bottisford, or certainly in the Vale, as Councillor Higgins has alluded to, where there's affordable houses. Myself and Councillor Steadman have been talking over the last month about how can we get one bed flats into and houses into the village, and 2 beds into the Vale is beyond me. And the other thing I'm going to mention to the members is really think that if you rent a house in this borough privately and you're dependent on benefits, you're going to be short £31.50 a month if you're on a low income, on a minimum wage, right? And we're throwing away affordable housing in a village like Bottisford that's got low income. That low incomes coming in, lower paid jobs. There is some good paid jobs and some great employers. Now, why couldn't we? And I think the developer's been badly advised here, because working in the housing sector myself, in the housing association, working with the developer, there could have been a compromise made here with a bit of energy efficient products put into the property and components put into the property, and bringing a housing association on board, bringing Homes England on board, and you can get a nice mix going and have a bit of a compromise. It just seems to be one way just to ram through a planning application because nobody wants to make the difficult decision of telling the developer what's what and what actually is in the policies locally and what will be accepted by the councillors and the councillors in this council. And I'm not going to sit here tonight and accept something that's wrong, morally wrong, to do something, selling your soul to the devil, to accept detriment to our local residents. The other thing is, and let's take ourselves back to the Brooksby application in my ward. There was a clear message went to the officers that night: housing mix. And what do we see here? Again, the housing mix isn't right. And I'm going to keep going at this until this has got right, because that is not acceptable. You know, maybe you don't want to listen to us. Maybe we're not important. Maybe we don't know what we're doing. Maybe we're not professional. But you know what? I think I do know what I'm talking about, and I'm not going to accept it. And I have to listen to residents of my ward criticize me for giving in that. I'm not going to do it on this application with regards to that. I'm sympathetic to everything that Councillor Chandler has said. And the other thing is, let's take it in this. The National Housing Federation is working with housing associations, and so is the Institute of Housing with councils, that will play a critical role in our collective journey to net zero as to reach that goal of 78% emission reduction by 2035. So to say that it can't be achieved when the appetite out there in the market is very much there is completely wrong. And basically, there needs to be, bring the developer in, sit down and sort something out that works for everybody involved, and take on board the interest. Like the cut down at 3, as Mr. Bayman, Councillor Bayman has said, and then say, oh, we're going to, you know, put some, it contradicts the whole argument of the whole climate change issues. So I've made my points. I know I've laboured on a little bit, but we are not, I am not going to support this application, and I agree with Councillor Chandler about how the report's written. And I think we need a serious conversation with the officers in the next few weeks about what's going on here. Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Steadman.
Thank you. I think we all support Councillor Chandler. We all know that she's a great advocate of affordable housing, particularly for the youngsters in Bottisford, and she's fought very hard for it, as has Councillor Pritchett. I won't be supporting this application. The housing mix, which is policy C2. Areas of separation. I know this is an allocated site. I accept that, but I don't think the layout is sympathetic to that, nor the conservation area. I'm a smidge concerned about the flooding, but we won't go there, Jim. And I have serious concerns, as highlighted by Historic England, about the multiple impacts. They highlight very high levels of harm here. They actually said in their first letter of the 16th of April 2020 that they would like dialogue going forward with this site, and from their second letter it doesn't seem apparent that they've had that dialogue. And they quote quite a few MPPF policies in there as well. So I think on EN4, areas of separation, contribute to the setting of historic built form, which is EN6. EN13, the protection and enhancement of heritage assets. D1, because it's not sympathetic to the conservation area or the areas of separation. And C2, the housing mix, and the various ones that historically, in fact, I'm going to propose refuse, to be honest with you. I think, you know, sorry, did I got that the wrong way around. And the NPPF, and I think this is the 2019 version, 127, 190, 192, 193 and 200. There's plenty to go at. We all know there's plenty to go at.
Did you get all that, Jim?
Do you want me to say them again?
That'd be great.
Okay. I think other people might please chip in. C2, the housing mix. EN4, I don't think it's sympathetic to the area of separation. EN6, contribute to the setting of the historic built form and features of the settlement, which it doesn't. Do you want me to carry on? Yeah, EN 13, protect and enhance heritage assets. And new developments that should make a positive contribution to those assets. That is not coming through to me from the Historic England's comments, to be honest. D1, the siting, layout and density, I don't think is sympathetic to the scheduled monument, the conservation area, or the area of separation, or this edge of village site. And Councillor Chandler was correct. I had a job distinguishing where Easthorpe ended, and I drove past it 3 times, basically. I think when we go to what Historic England quote, and I think they're quoting from the 2019 version of the NPPF, you've got paragraphs 127, 190, 192, 193 and 200. And then I think Councillor Pritchett quoted policies 18 and 19, which were site-specific policies of the neighbourhood plan, and policy 8. Have I missed anything? Oh, I think that was
18,
sorry.
19.
I think Councillor Pritchett mentioned policies 18 and 19, which were site-specific ones, and also policy 8 with design. Yeah, I think one's probably, yeah, probably done too many. Have I missed anything?
Councillor Holmes, I presume you're going to second.
I'm delighted to second this application. I'm one of these people that doesn't want as much affordable housing. The only reason why I don't want it in my area, and we're talking about Bottisford Easthorpe, in my area, we haven't got the jobs. So why on earth, you know, I just fail to understand when, you know, it is, Bottisford is an area of jobs of all different types. We've got the beaver factory, we've got all sorts of places. Oh no. And so I'm to put my foot on it because it won't go off. I'm delighted to second this application for refusal. I will stop now, thank goodness. Sorry about that.
Thank you. Councillor Higgins.
Yeah, Councillor Steadman said, was there any that she may have missed? And quoting the NPPF on the report, page 68, I think she said 193, 194, but didn't say 196. And as that's in the,
I think I said 193 and 200.
Yeah. Okay. So
do
I don't know.
Do I need 196 as well?
I don't know. I'm just saying because obviously Historic England have put that on here in this document.
That's fine. Yeah, I'm happy to add that. Let's get them all.
So you want to add 196 as well?
If this is the way we're heading, can we just leave it as the appropriate references to from the NPPF? The reason I'm saying that is that a number of those are procedural in nature. They don't sort of point you to what's right and wrong. They tell you how to make your judgment, and that's what you've done. But they're not the key to the door. The actual layout is the key to the door.
Are you happy with that, both Councillor Steadman and Councillor Holmes?
I think we've got enough policies, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Any other comments on this? Nope. Okay. I would just like to add that I wholeheartedly support the comments from Councillor Chandler this evening. I am quite concerned about this particular site, and it just leads me to think that we've got a local plan, we've got neighbourhood plans. Does this mean that because we want to have zero carbon for our new homes, does that mean that our local plan isn't fit for purpose? So it is quite worrying. I think we should be able to have low carbon houses, good green credentials, and continue with having our local plan affordable homes and housing mix. There is a balance to be achieved, and this hasn't achieved it. So I'm fully in support of refusal. You can indeed.
just make one response to the debate and some of the things that were said there, particularly from Councillor Brown. I'm a bit worried that some aspects, Councillor Chandler criticised the report, and maybe it's the quality of the report that doesn't put it over. No one is trying to say for a moment that it's okay, let alone desirable, to have no affordable housing. No one for a moment is trying to say housing mix doesn't matter. Those messages, they're close to our heart without being told. And when you tell us, it just reinforces that. You'll see in this report, it cites them as negatives because of that. So it's the tenor of the report isn't one of doesn't matter, it's one of counterbalance, if that exact word is used towards the end of section 5. So I'm in a roundabout way, I'm trying to reassure Councillor Brown that the message is understood.
Thank you. Councillor Steadman.
Sorry, I'd just like to add something on the back of your comments, Chair. You may remember recently that we had a workshop with a developer in Harby who are proposing, I think, 45 quite eco-friendly, triple glazed, etc., ground source heat pumps, and they've managed 12 affordables on that site. Thank you.
So it can be done. Thank you. Any other comments from the table? Councillor Posnett.
I would just like to say I don't disagree with any of the comments that have been made, but I think it's such a shame that we've had this development with all these eco credentials, and I just do hope that they don't go away full stop, but that they look if they can work with us and develop something that, although Councillor Holmes said he doesn't like workshops, I'm afraid this is an instance where a workshop would be excellent. And I just hope that they don't go away, but they talk to us and come back, and let's see if we can have some eco houses, because, you know, we've signed the climate agenda, we've signed up to that. Let's be doing something towards it. And it's our job as planning committee, I believe, to encourage these eco developments, but we need it to be right for where they want to put them and for the area where we live, and also that they fit in with our local plan and those sorts of things. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. If there's no more additions to the debate, I think we'll have a vote now on this. The proposal is to refuse. Shall I read all the reasons out? We're all quite clear on this. Are you sure? Okay, right, okay. Right, it's been proposed and seconded to refuse. So all in favour of refusal, please raise your hands. That's unanimous. Thank you, everybody. The application is refused. Would you like a comfort break? Okay, quick 5 minutes then. Thank you. Everyone's back round the table. Thank you. Our next item is 4.4, which is 20/01157 out, which is outline. Residential development of two 1.5-storey dwellings at 19B High Street, Waltham on the Wolds. Mr. Worley, over to you.
Thank you. Thanks. If we could get the images, images up, please, Adam. Oh, not that one again. Yeah, go, let's start there. Okay, so just the parameters first. So this is an outline application for two dwellings in that back paddock, and we'll home in on that in a moment, with all matters reserved except for access. If you can move on a slide, please, Adam. So the access comes onto High Street, and you can see there that the proposal is to formalise, for want of a better word, how it makes that junction with splays and radii and visibility splays and so on, and to cut to the chase, the Highways Authority satisfied with that. And the next, please, Adam. We'll come back to this, no doubt, in the debate. The access way winds through the existing buildings at various widths, and that's an extract from the application drawings, and you can see there that at its narrowest point, the width is 3.65 metres. That's significant in terms of the debate I suspect we're going to have about access for emergency vehicles, and I've got some background on that for a moment's time. And the next, please, Adam. Yeah, this is more important. So our old friend, the illustrative layout, not the firm proposal, but it does illustrate the sort of spaciousness of the site and how two 1.5-storey 3-bedroom dwellings, that's the proposition here, can be accommodated on that site. As you can see, that's not a huge demand on a site of this size, and that is the scope of the proposal before us. So the site's within the built-up area of Waltham. In neighbourhood plan terms, it's within the village envelope of Waltham. Policies are supportive of development of that nature, subject to the usual criteria of design, of course we don't have, and access, which we do. Come back to that in a moment. It's not a protected site by any of the, certainly the local plan designations. We don't go down to this level of detail, do we? But neither in the neighbourhood plan designations. And I'm making that point because there's a flavour of being treated as a special, of having special status, but it doesn't. It's just white, literally, in the neighbourhood plan, not one of the protected open spaces or in the conservation area or any other form of constraint. The statement has been made that it interferes with one of the protected views in the neighbourhood plan, which is the one further to the northwest, but Twells Close is between that viewpoint and this site, so you can't actually see it clearly from over there. So I'll bite the bullet and explain a little bit more about what I've learned about emergency access. So Adam, could you just scroll back a couple of slides? It's only to show that 3.65 metres. So the building regs, which are born of a British standard, require 3.7 metres at this point, as the report has pointed out, and I know some of you have had your attention drawn to that. But that's not all the building regs say. That's part of a chapter of the building regs that talks about the ability for compensatory measures to be employed and judged if the standard isn't met in full. And my view is, for two reasons, that with that margin of deficiency, 0.45 metres, and with the fact that it's building regulations, so a whole separate regulatory regime will need to tackle this question, as well as us tonight, that I don't think that stacks up to grounds to resist this application should it become centre stage in the debate tonight. I think that's probably sufficient for me introducing the application. As I say, it's outlined, so rather unlike the last one, there's a whole lot less to talk about. You will have seen the recommendations approval for the reasons I've outlined about policy status, first and foremost.
Any questions of Mr. Worley before we start? No, okay. We have two speakers on this item this evening. The first one is Councillor Chris Gray, Parish Council. You have 3 minutes, and again, you'll have a warning when it's 2.5 minutes. Okay.
Good evening, councillors. The Parish Council considers that this application should be refused for the following reasons. Policy H8 of the Neighbourhood Plan has a number of components relating to windfall development, and this proposal does not comply with many of these elements. It does not meet parish needs, and Waltham has already significantly exceeded the quota of proposed developments to 2036. This development, we feel, would not provide a safe vehicular and pedestrian access to the site. LCC Highways have stated that vehicles should be able to pass each other safely while entering and exiting the drive. In reality, this is not possible due to the narrow width of the drive, and it's also exacerbated by the fact that there are also cars consistently parked either side of this access. Getting onto what Jim was talking about distances and things, we've been advised from a past incident on this property that emergency vehicles have issues using this shared driveway. And as Jim rightly said, policy B5 of building regs states there should be a minimum width of 3.7 metres for fire appliances. However, as you've seen, the narrowest part of this drive is 3.6 metres. However, what Jim didn't say is it's actually reduced to 3.2 metres by overhanging canopies, so it's worse than you think. On refuse collection days, there are regularly 6 to 7 bins on the high street pavement by the drive, causing a hazard for pedestrians, and with the addition of parked cars either side, this makes visibility almost impossible for vehicles exiting the drive, who have to be positioned almost in the middle of the road to get full visibility of oncoming traffic. Approval of this application could result in up to 14 bins on the pathway. This application would have an adverse impact on the character of the area and amenity of neighbours in terms of being overlooked, and does not respect the shape and form of the village and townscape. It would result in losses of biodiversity and green areas important to our village. Policy ENV2 of the Neighbourhood Plan seeks to ensure open spaces are maintained, and as this proposal borders a conservation area, it's ecologically sensitive and should be retained as such. Policy ENV6 of the Neighbourhood Plan states that development proposals will be resisted where they impact on biodiversity, landscape and amenity value. This site is an integral part of a wildlife corridor within the village, and by approving this application, it would mean not only a loss of biodiversity, but a significant barrier for wildlife, something our own biodiversity group is actively working to avoid. Currently, the village is experiencing major drainage and sewerage issues, which Councillor Holmes referred to, which parishioners are particularly upset about on the high street. And to quote Severn Trent, who are trying to repair and find solutions to the issue, there are too many properties using the system currently. Adding more will only exacerbate this. The Parish Council urges members to refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, members? No. Okay, thank you very much. Our last speaker of the evening is Miranda Pilkington, who is speaking on behalf of the applicant. You have 3 minutes, and there'll be a warning when you have 30 seconds left.
Thank you. Good evening, I'm Miranda, the applicant's wife. Good evening, councillors. Thank you for this opportunity to provide additional assurance on the 2 issues that have been raised. The first issue that I wanted to talk about was the constrained access. Highways have supported the application on the basis that the width of the opening of the drive from the road is 6.2 metres, and the pedestrian visibility displays are acceptable at 1 metre by 1 metre each side, and mitigations have all been agreed to. The access to the site comprises a private drive serving 3 properties. The junction with High Street has been approved by Highways. The drive is of variable width and offers adequate space to enable vehicles to pass in 2 places. The narrowest point is 3.65. From ground level up to eye level, it isn't obstructed by canopies. That's incorrect, providing ample height and width for large vehicles. We are, however, aware that building regulations advise that a fire engine requires a minimum width of road between curbs of 3.7 metres and a minimum width of gateways of 3.1 metres and a minimum clearance height of between 3.7 and 4 metres. Now, this part of the drive satisfies these requirements unless the drive is considered to be a curbed road, in which case it falls short of the ideal required, and it falls short by 5 centimetres. Because this is unclear, we have been advised that building control, in consultation with the local fire and rescue services, may use other dimensions because fire appliances are not standardised. If you are concerned about this matter, we request that we investigate this further to ensure the health and safety of the site. And we would also further mitigate this situation by installing a sprinkler system in each of the new properties, obviously taking expert advice. There is provision within the site for adequate parking and turning, but this is an outline proposal and this can be altered to suit your views at reserved matters stage. The second issue that's been raised is loss of green area. Now, the Heritage Report confirms that the proposed development satisfies all relevant national and local policies. It is not an important area, it is not seen from the public viewpoints, and it is not in the conservation area. It is in fact residential garden land, which planning policy does not prevent us from developing. And there are 9 examples of similar developments along the High Street. There is no view of the site from surrounding roads, that is Windsor Road, Bergins Lane and Bescaby Lane, and the proposed dwellings have been designed as smaller 1.5-storey properties to reflect local plan policy preferences. So the development will not affect views, settlement approaches or the setting of important buildings, and landscaping proposals submitted at reserved masses stage will satisfy policy D1 of the local plan. We will include wildflowers to encourage bees and natural hedgerows to promote local wildlife. There are no negative impacts on policy SS3 and no loss of high-grade agricultural land, and there is no risk of flooding. In relation to policy EN1 of the local plan, topography is not considered to be a significant consideration, and the site is level and there are no features of particular note. Thank you for your time, and if you've got any clarification questions, I'm happy to try and answer them.
I was just about to interrupt you then, but well, thank you. Any questions? Councillor Bindloss?
Thank you. Yeah, in relation to the overhanging canopies, your photo too that you sent us. I noticed, and I'm assuming that this is what you alluded to when you mention overhanging canopies, that there are. I'm not sure if they're windows that stand out or what they are, but they are nonetheless there and in that kind of line of sight. And I suppose the problem there would be that if it's a lorry and it's a reasonably long lorry that's coming by there, it's got to maneuver beyond that, which would actually potentially narrow that down. That's assuming that's what was being mentioned. So I can see that actually could reduce quite severely to that 3.2. Should you need to have a lorry down there that's actually trying to get past those canopies.
Can I answer that, please? Because I know that some people have been to visit the site, but it actually is incorrect. Visibly, the photographs taken make it look like it obscures the drive, but the pinch point, the narrow point of the drive, is not obscured at all by the canopies. And if you come and visit, which you're welcome to do, where the canopies are over the windows is actually the wider part of the drive, where there's a point in the drive where 2 vehicles can easily pass. We actually put the canopies on the house that we built because it was requested for privacy purposes from our neighbours at the time.
Yeah, I appreciate what you're saying about the canopies. But what I'm trying to explain is that if you've got a long lorry that's going down there, then at that pinch point, it's got to move across further to actually clear it. And it could be difficult. And your picture 7, your photo 7 here, kind of shows that lorry reversing down into it. So, you know, it is a consideration. And I did actually come and obviously have a look at the site. Thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Steadman?
Yes, thank you, Chair. You actually said there are 3 properties serviced by this road. So where do the people on the farmhouse on is it Main Street? Is it Main Street?
High Street.
High Street. Where do they park?
Where do they
Round the
park?
back of their property via that drive?
They have 3 spaces that they park in. They have a space outside their house, a parking space that's open, and they have 2 open garages.
Is that accessed off that drive though?
They are part of the drive.
So there's 4 properties that use access off that drive?
No, 3 properties. Sorry, the farmhouse on the front, Cresswell Spring Farm, has 3 parking spaces. There is then the property that we live in, 19B, and there's 19A.
So that's 1 property. I thought that was 2 properties.
No, one
And
property.
can you tell me who measured this 3.65 metres? Was it your architect?
Sorry, I didn't hear you.
Sorry, on the plans, it says 3.65 metres. Could you tell me who measured that?
The planning consultant, we've measured it, we've remeasured it, because it's you know, we wanted to be very honest about it.
Because I measured it as well, actually, and I didn't get it to 3.65, I'm afraid. Thank you very much.
Any other questions? No. Okay, thank you very much for coming on. Thank you. Mr. Worley, do you want to make any comments on what you've heard from the speakers this evening?
I only picked up one thing from there that I wanted to make comment on, and that was about neighbourhood plan policy H8. It's where Mr. Gray started. He said H8 requires that development must excuse me, infill sites for development must meet the type of housing requirement identified for the parish. So I looked at what the need for the parish was, and it says, I quote, dwellings of 3 bedrooms or fewer and single-storey accommodation. So what we're dealing here with is 2 dwellings of 3 bedrooms. So it all tied up to my mind.
Thank you. Any questions of Mr. Worley before we start the debate? Nope. Oh, Councillor Holmes.
I know you're suffering like I am with cold. Did you say that they should be single story? You said single story just now, didn't you? 3-bedroom single story?
The neighbourhood plan says dwellings of 3 bedrooms or fewer and single-storey dwellings will be supported. The proposal is for 2 1.5-storey 3-bedroom dwellings.
Who would like to start this evening on this one? Councillor Higgins.
I'll kick it off then. So I think pretty much. I mean, I heard some of the debates about bins and all the other stuff, but you can't refuse planning applications because someone inconsiderately puts a bin out and then blocks displays, and the county council would turn around, which they do also say, if you park inappropriately, their response, though they would, I don't think they would do it, is to put double yellow lines on it, because you don't have the right to park on the highway. So we can't go there on it. It's all about, I think, is the local plan and the neighbourhood plan supportive of this application in this area? And I think on the housing, 2 houses, 1.5, I think, as you said, Jim, we'd have to try and tie that down. I think it broadly does. And if the highways say the displays are fine, that's that's also fine. I think it's all going to then centre on, which is this width part for the fire engine and everything else. And that's the bit I'm not sure about what the professional advice is, because obviously, and I know it's building regulations and some of it can be guidance. I do think that the fire crews are fairly good at getting through all on there, but and I think, was it Councillor Binloss, you actually went to the station manager, and I don't know what they were. It would have been helpful if they had provided a comment, because while I think there's lots of things for this application, I don't want to permit something and then make the mistake, and the fire brigade weren't happy with it. And there's obviously those things there. So I suppose it's really just what the professional officers are advising me on. Because otherwise, if this gap wasn't there, I'd just be permit, really. It's quite simple, I think, but it's all hanging on this part, and I'm not sure what I'm being advised.
Councillor Steadman.
Thank you, Chair. I tried to drive up this road and I struggled to turn around. I really struggled to turn around. It's about a 5 or 6 point turn. And I actually took a tape measure because I knew this would be integral. I measured that gap and I made it 3.4 metres. Probably 3.55 if you knock the downpipe out the way. And I think, you know, it is all levering on this. But I think another aspect to this is once you get a fire engine up there, how are you going to get it back down? You've got to turn it round somewhere. And I don't see, was it 18 metres turning display on it? To be honest, I also don't think it's good design to have to drag your wheelie bins 80 metres to the collection point. I think that's very bad design. But I'm happy to see what other councillors think. Thank you.
Councillor Holmes.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Normally, I would probably have been happy with these two houses. I'm at the moment trying to, or in the process of selling my property. I have sold some of the land, but there is a driveway out onto the Eastwell Road. Now, from my solicitor, she, and it's all quoted, it's not me, and I think I sent that thing to you, that it has to be, any entrance or exit has to be at least 3.8 on the level, that's straight. Now, I've been to look at this, I've been again today to look at this, and you could not get a fire engine round corners, or whatever it might be. You can get them in so far, you can back in so far, but then there are angles and corners. Well, it's just not possible to do. I think it is a lovely green area, and I have had people from Windsor Road on the other side not terribly happy either. I have problems with this, not particularly these two dwellings, but I have a great problem at this point in time, as everybody does. And I know we perhaps want to go on about sewerage, but the smell from this, from the high street is dreadful. And we have got to think about these things before we go any further, before this is only an outline. But I would have preferred this actually to have been deferred for some time to get our sewerage and water right. We have it. I can't tell you how bad things are. They're just dreadful. And put more houses on to this, not just this area, but the whole of Waltham. Well, I could cry, but it's just, I feel really emotional about the whole thing. And yes, the first speaker did say about a conservation area. I know it isn't, but it is getting to be very close. And there is a piece of green there, which I like to see. So I would really like to see what the rest of the councillors would like to say about this. But it is a fact that you have to be 3.8, but it has to be on a straight road. And this is from my solicitor only last week. Nothing to do with this at all. This was something that was mine, and it actually, I don't know whether our solicitor would agree with that, but it is actually a fact. So thank you.
I'm not personally aware of anything that's 3.8 metres wide. On the sale and purchase of properties, they will consider all sorts of different things, including adopted roads, parking provision. I can't comment on what the 3.8 metres is without knowing, I'm afraid. Sorry.
Councillor Bindloss.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I did actually go and have an extremely interesting hour or so with the fire station the other day. And it was interesting, it was enlightening, and the machine that we actually are blessed with is actually 2.49 metres in its width from mirror to mirror. And it was very interesting, and we talked about a lot of different things, not necessarily just regarding this particular incident, but I think, yes, they can get it. It is possible to get it down there. It's a squeeze, and they do this day in, day out, squeezing fire engines into tight spots. Yes, they can do it. But the issue is, if that fire's at night time and it's pouring with rain and whatever else, the visibility on that machine is actually quite badly reduced. And whereas I'm sure they would tell you, yes, they can do it, it's a case of, is it easy to do it? And how long is it going to take them to do it to actually get that machine down there in the first place? But it was very, very interesting. And we talked about a lot of different appliances. Thank you.
Anybody else want to? Councillor Higgins.
Well, it was just the question. I don't know if the officer, the case officer, is like, obviously, if it's 3.7 and 3.64 or whatever it is, what's the advice from the professional officers in regards to this? Because if you're getting building regs and it says one thing, how, is there a tolerance? Is there a judgment, or is it 3.7 to the now?
Yeah, I've been chasing this up all afternoon, not being a building control professional. It is 3.7 is a standard. So we're deficient because we're at 3.65. So we're talking about that. The standard, there's not a tolerance around the standard. What there is a qualification in the application of it. And that's expressed in words, not in tables or figures. And it talks about taking into account the circumstances and taking into account excuse me, compensatory measures. And when I was with pursuing the building control manager on this, he was telling me about how there's a great big menu of compensatory measures that can be employed. But off the top of his head, he said things like sprinkler systems in the house would be regarded as sufficient to counterbalance that. He mentioned some others, which I'm afraid have slipped my mind at the moment. But the other thing that concerns me with this for us and for tonight, and I might need Mr. Pitwell to come in on this as well, is about treading our toes on other regulatory regimes. And in the same way, we couldn't start talking about the licensing of pubs and the hours they could stay open to any more than we could start making judgments on the building regulations, partly because of our authority, our role, our authority, partly because of our knowledge. It's not what we do. So I'd be very nervous that we hung our hat on that aspect of this application.
Yeah, I'll try and come and explain. I'm no building control expert either. My understanding is, though, that this is a planning application. So what we're looking at here is the principle of development and whether that accords with local policy and other aspects. The building control regime is what looks at the detailed construction plans to check that that accords with what is required. just because something has planning permission granted, that doesn't mean it will get building regulation approval. And that is for them to, they would be able to enforce that. So whilst you can consider the aspect of access, it wouldn't necessarily be for us to consider the actual detail of the exact dimensions. It would still need building control approval.
Answers my question, Chair. So,
Okay, Councillor Chandler, did you have your hand raised earlier?
Yes, I'm really erring on the side of Councillor Holmes when she suggested a deferment. There's a meeting with Severn Trent, I think it's a month tomorrow. And I do think we need to get this problem sorted of water and sewerage. I mean, they are serious matters. We sort of brush them under the carpet and say, oh, it'll go away. But with a tendency at the moment, and this isn't this council, it's nationwide, we're building before we've got the infrastructure in place. And it's the long-standing residents who usually catch the cold on this, because they're at the end of the line, such as Easthorpe and Musson, where there's no ring main, and they run out of water quickly. And I mean, Severn Trent told some of my residents, well, when the weather gets hot, we get unprecedented demand and we can't cope with it. Well, why do they keep waving applications through? They haven't got the sewer sorted out at Waltham. I mean, you've only got to go to Waltham, as I did last week, to look at this one. And there's holes everywhere and pumps working where they're trying to clear this sewerage mess up. Surely we need to get these things sorted before we give any more permissions out. I mean, I'd like to see a deferment on this until we've talked to Severn Trent again as to what their long-term plans are. I mean, we can't keep putting more and more houses. Oh, it's only 2. Yes, I know it's 2, but it's still 2, isn't it?
Councillor Brown.
Can I ask Jim what would a deferment achieve other than making a decision either way tonight?
So I think what a deferment would achieve is accommodating this meeting with Severn Trent. I'm just trying to think around the table how many of you were involved with it. So we had a meeting with them 3 weeks ago, something like that, and basically laid on the table all of our concerns about the infrastructure, but also concerns about how they engage in this stuff as well. And the meeting in a month's time is them telling us what changes they've made to do things better. It wouldn't be site specific, it won't give us the answer to this site at all, but it may give us confidence that their machinery does respond to the decisions that we make. I think that's a fair summary.
It would give us more insight into Severn Trent's future plans for Waltham, and if they're going to put any capital into it. I mean, in our situation in Bottisford, we're not going to get a better main because there's nothing in the capital programme for at least 2 to 3 years. I mean, that's a long way down the line when you've got no water coming out your taps and the farmer's got no water for the chickens and cows and sheep and beast. I mean, it's no answer at all, that isn't.
Anybody else would like to comment? Oh, Mel, sorry. I'm automatically look over that way.
Sorry, Chair. Yeah, I think if Councillor Chandler is going to go for defer, then I would like someone here, apart from myself, I've got a tape measure actually in my handbag, to go and measure that shortest distance, please, because I got it to about 3.4, but I didn't include, I was from the down pipe across, which I assume they're not going to knock one of those out. So if somebody could go and measure that as well, if we're going to defer it. Thank you.
Councillor Holmes.
I could just make a point. We know that the High Street, and I'll go back to this sewage thing, but we know that the High Street is fractured. We know that. And when I was down at the other end of the village the other day, and I talked to the manager who was actually on the ground, and it's at somebody's garden where they could have easily put 2 cars in the hole that they'd made. He said, he actually did say, and Parish Councillor said about it. He said, well, there are too many houses on the sewage system at Waltham. That is what the workman said, and he was actually on the ground. The other thing is, just further on here, that there's a hairdresser's. Well, she needs a booster pump to do the water, because we have to keep pulling it up, or there isn't any water. Now, these things are paramount, and it's not that the application, this application particularly, but we cannot keep going on and on and on. Because when a house is built, it is a statutory requirement for Severn Trent or whoever's water board it is to connect them to the water and to the sewage. That is a different part altogether. Doesn't mean to say the work, but that, and honestly, I cannot think that we can keep going on like this. No, a house here, a house there, one or two more, just think we can't. Thank you.
Chair, I'd like to propose to defer this application until we've had the meeting with Severn Trent and until we get clarification on that shortest gap there, please. And I actually would like to ask the applicants if they would consider, if we can get a fire engine up that road, to provide the room to turn it around if possible in the design. Thank you.
We've had a proposal to defer. I'm looking for a seconder for that proposal. Councillor Holmes. Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Nope. Right, all those in favour of a deferment, please raise your hand. 2, 3, 4, 5. 2, 3, 6. That's 7 for defer. Against? Abstain? 2 abstentions. What? I didn't see your hand raised, Councillor Wood. Did you vote for deferral? Oh, that's 9 for deferral. No, 8 for deferral. Sorry, I can't count. 8 for deferral and 2 abstentions. Thank you. The item is deferred. Thank you. I don't have any urgent matters to announce this evening. So the meeting, well, according to mine, is 2053, but it isn't. It's 20. No, actually, goodness me. So mine does too, but this clock doesn't, and my other one doesn't either. So it's 2045 according to that clock. Thank you. Meeting's closed.